Hey everybody. So
Hello.
I am Rachel Hoffman and I'm the owner of Soundstar Early Childhood Music, and I'm here having lunch with my friends, and we decided to turn on the camera because we're discussing a question that a parent emailed to us. And the question is, when should kids begin taking lessons if they want to learn an instrument? Are there certain ways to go about this to yield the best result, ongoing commitment, and joy? And so we were just sitting talking about it, and so I'd like to introduce my friends because I value their insights into this. And so tell everybody who you are and tell them like how you've, I don't know, how long you've studied music, how long you've taught music, what things you've taught, that kind of thing, so parents know that you're not making stuff up.
Right. Well, my name is Karin Simmons, and I have been studying, I started studying piano classically when I was 4, and studied until I was about 16. And I've been teaching various elements of early childhood music and piano lessons for, the better part of probably 15 years. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And
My name is Georgia, and I guess I started studying music when I was 9 years old and went to Berklee College of Music.
at 9?
At 9, yes.
No.
10 years later. And I've been teaching for the past 7 years.
Very cool. She's a very busy teacher. She might be teaching your kids.
Oh.
I'm not sure. And I have been, I started piano at 5, and I studied piano for 6 years, and then I switched to voice, and I studied voice for 6 years, and then I went on to college to study voice. I also went to Berklee College of Music, and
I did not go to Berklee.
She did not go to Berklee. Where did you go?
I'm so sad. I went to Anderson University, and I got my degree in music business with a minor in voice performance. So,
And we have connections
We
to
do.
Anderson. I have to tell you, my family was involved at Anderson. There was a little pressure for me to go, and I didn't.
we would have
We could have been
met.
friends. Yeah, it's a good thing we're friends now. Anyway, so how long have I been teaching? 23 years. So voice is my main private instruction, and I teach early childhood music. And so we have opinions on on private lessons. And for those of you that are new to this concept, you should know that this is controversial. Hopefully we won't make any enemies by sharing our opinions on this subject, but we're just going to be honest with you and hopefully give you some solid advice for planning for your children, maybe even for yourself. So,
Sure.
First of all, there are many approaches.
Yeah.
So how would you all explain this? I guess there are different ways that people approach music. Probably the way that most families consider private lessons are you learning by ear
Right.
or by note?
Right.
And that's always what people ask.
Right.
And for some reason, most people who talk to me assume that the only method of not reading by note is Suzuki.
Right.
That is a very common method that you start listening and imitating, but it's certainly not the only method. That's a very common method because I think it has a lot to do with when you start
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah.
So some of the methods, obviously Suzuki, that came from a gentleman named Suzuki from Japan. And there's Dalcroze, who was Swiss, and he's known for incorporating your rhythmic movement into the learning. There's Kodai, who was Hungarian. And I've made a note over here. Orff is German. Orff, you probably have heard about Orff instruments, or maybe not, but it's like glockenspiels and xylophones and metallophones and things like that you incorporate into the learning. and then Gordon. And Sound Start is based on the research of Gordon. And also we start without notation.
Right.
So there are a lot of people who have that approach. So I guess before we dive into strong opinions, how did you learn? How did each of you learn? Was it one of those methods? Do you think it was a combination? Did you even know growing up what method you were learning with?
Beatles songbook. It was very, I learned from a working musician, and so I guess technically that would be a lot of ear learning, learning how to read chord charts. So that's not really notation. So, you're learning how to read the measures and the bars and and that kind of thing.
Move at the right
tempo.
Maybe you could say that Delcroze would be behind that a little bit. I don't know. He's not here to represent himself.
Right.
Karin, how about you?
Well, at 4 years old, obviously, there's limited ability to read anything. So I started in a class environment where my mom actually had to blow into the forgive me, what is the name of those? It's the little key. It's a little keyboard. So
melodica.
Yeah, the melodica. My mom had to blow into the melodica to actually make the noise, and we would just start learning actually the notes. That's how we started, just learning the notes of the keyboard, not any, having to read anything. And that came later. When I stopped doing that, and I got into more lessons of, I was with the Royal Conservatory of Music, which was in Canada. That was sort of their big umbrella for classical training was the Royal Conservatory. And so any Canadian listeners will probably remember and know all of the grades and the books and the adjudications and all of that kind of stuff that comes with all of that. So
And just a side note, because you mentioned Royal Conservatory, so families in the program may not know that our music is their early childhood program.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
So I didn't even know that.
Music for young children there, and
That is fantastic.
It's our curriculum, so we're using the same stuff.
That's cool. That's really cool.
So for me, my next door neighbor was a piano teacher, so that was very easy for my parents. So they just basically would hand me the book, a $5 bill, and push me out the door, and I would just go sit on my neighbor's piano bench, and she was very patient to work with me. And so I would say it was a very traditional approach. We started right with notation. I don't remember any activities, any movement or play.
Right.
Thankfully, I was a pretty attentive kid, so I think it worked okay for me. I was ready for that at 5. And then in elementary school, I didn't know this at the time, but I was learning Kodai's methods.
Oh, okay.
So it was, using the hand signs for solfege. I don't know if everybody, here I am doing it. If you don't know what that is, that looks really weird, but
Do, re, mi, fa, sol,
do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Yeah.
Nice.
So that was that. And what else? The ta, ta, ti, ti, ta, that sort of thing. So I didn't know that was the approach, but it followed me through all of my life. In fact, sight reading, I always would hear the solfege in my head. So obviously that had a big impact, even though I had no clue what I was learning. So I guess, as you can see, that we had a mixture of things, and probably a lot of the way that we learned, we didn't even realize there were methods behind it.
Exactly.
So our teachers were taught a certain way, and they taught us a certain way, and we all kind of add a little bit to our own teaching. You know, if you have a student who's struggling with a certain element of
Right.
music, then you're going to incorporate something new to try to keep their interest
Yeah.
and help them understand. And I think it's important, all the people that we talked about, all the different methods, they were not taught with their method.
No.
So they brought other ideas into creating their method.
Right.
And all of them had different reasons for creating
Mm-hmm.
their method. Like Suzuki, he was not allowed to study music when he was young. And so that was an influence in how he created his program and how he understands music. Gordon, who we follow, I think he's really easy for music teachers to follow because his method is the method that is most researched. He has the largest amount of research of any method, and that's just who he was. He's a researcher. He just worked with children and adults and infants, and so there's an enormous amount of research for teachers to look at.
Right.
So that's very helpful. And so if you want to check him out, it's the Gordon Institute of Music Learning.
Yeah.
GIML.org, I
Yes.
think. And he has written books. Sadly, he passed away, I think, last year.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Okay.
But there's a lot of information there if you want to look into his research. I think it's super helpful. But I think let's talk about then so I guess I would gather that you all feel like there are many valid approaches to studying music.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if there are any that I would say avoided at all costs. I think the thing that I would feel most strongly about is that it's developmentally appropriate.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely, based on where your child is that you're teaching. If you've got a 3 or a 4-year-old who cannot read yet, it doesn't make any sense to put notated music in front of them.
Right.
Because there's not the coordination between looking at something and being able to translate that into fingers, be that on the piano or violin or whatever. It's not there, so that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially as like a, when it connects to the muscle memory
Yeah.
and moving. I think it might be appropriate though to make, games out of like, here's
Yeah.
the C.
Yeah.
And I have this toy that is really
Yeah.
awesome. Where
Is it for you or for them?
I call it a toy to get them excited about it, but it's really a learning tool. But you move the little circle up the staff,
Nice.
and that's really what I use with maybe that age group because I primarily teach guitar, so that's a pretty unforgiving instrument for little fingers.
Yeah.
So if I have a really young student, I treat it more like a holistic music lesson with a guitar focus.
Yeah.
So we learn like the basics. We do a lot of the ta, tiki, ta, just kind of trying to meet them where they are and give them tools to grow and learn, where they'll be successful.
Yeah.
And just give them, solidify those roots so that they can be stronger when they are ready to learn how to read and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
I think we should maybe explain to parents that there are two stages of learning.
Yeah.
There's informal learning and there's formal learning,
Right.
and there's an age that informal learning is really only appropriate.
Yeah.
And then when they're ready for formal learning, then it's time for formal learning.
Right.
And
And that changes based on the child.
On the child.
Honestly, there's not a
Absolutely.
prescribed, there's not a prescribed time for when a child should start formal lessons. Because some kids are ready for it much earlier, and some aren't ready for it until much later than what we think. But I think we're all looking at probably the 4, 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there that the switch can pretty easily be made
To
from
formal.
informal to formal.
Right.
right.
Yeah.
So let's kind of explain what informal learning looks like. When I say informal learning, what do you think of as a teacher?
Well, I think very much of our Sound Start music classes, and I think of how we work with young children and how it's through play. We introduce concepts, but it's all under the umbrella of playing. And we have bells, and we attempt to keep the beat. As a teacher, I keep the strong beat, but a 18-month-old generally isn't keeping a strong beat, but they've got a bell.
Yes.
And it's fun.
And they have moments where they
have
lock in.
moments
Yes.
where they lock in. Exactly. And the same with, reinforcing tonal patterns. They're not singing necessarily the exact pitch of the song, but they have moments, and they start to gather those moments get strung more and more together.
Yes.
And it's all through play.
Yes.
Meeting them where they're at, what speaks to them.
Yes. And let me just clarify, if you're watching and you don't know what we mean by tonal patterns, we're speaking in Gordon. So Gordon, he did a lot of study about how children learn pitch and how children learn rhythm. And so his big word, which is unique to him, is audiation. And that is the ability to hear a phrase of music in your thoughts without it being played. So I would say, bum, 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 and Karin would say,
Bum, bum, bum.
yay! Yay! That's what we would do in class. So that is a tonal pattern. And children, the first step is just listening, then beginning to hear it themselves in their thoughts, and then they begin singing back in response incorrectly.
Of course.
And they fine tune that through the years. So that's what Karin was referencing. That's very much an informal learning approach to developing pitch. And we do the same with rhythm as well. Any other thoughts on informal learning?
No, I think that covers.
So, depending on the approach that you take, so for instance, when you start with Gordon, with that sort of methodology, it tends to be more in a classroom setting, and the earlier you start, the better. So research shows that if you start super early, then your child will benefit much more.
Yes.
So we start with newborns. And a lot of people think that's crazy. I think they picture a newborn sitting at a piano trying to play. But basically, we're just really immersing them so they can develop the musical language and just letting them really develop the pitch and the rhythm. And that is, that's the same idea as Dalcroze and Suzuki. And just get them in there and let them feel it and experience it. And it's a language. They will develop language skills.
Immersion versus instruction.
Right. Exactly. So that's absolutely the approach we take. And so you may think that you have been bringing your child to this cute little music class and it's just super fun for them, and one day they'll really study music. You may not realize that
they already are.
They are. And they're already part of a method. You may not even have known that. And I think that's really common in music education. Teachers aren't always saying, I subscribe to the blank method. Or, so we've already started your children with or without your knowledge. And so your job is to continue the work. I think it would be developmentally inappropriate to take a 3-year-old and put them in piano lessons that would expect them to read notation.
Yeah.
If you want to start your child with piano lessons, if they're very interested in piano, then you need to take an approach that is more, as we were discussing, where you're imitating, where you're copying each other, and
which
where
is
it's very playful.
In around here, or like Suzuki,
We're in
is
Nashville.
is the common way to be able to introduce your children to music in that sense, whether it's piano, violin, those kind of things. Suzuki is a really easy way to do that.
Absolutely. And I think we should be very honest with parents that your teacher will not like you if you do not do your homework. So basically, you are making a commitment as a parent that you are going to reinforce the learning at home. And that is true of our classes too. I mean, the kids will have fun in our classes regardless of whether you practice at home.
Yeah.
But
But
if
more
you actually
learning
want
is
them
gonna
to
happen.
learn, right, you need to be doing it at home. We always say we're the facilitator, you are the teacher. And that is true of the Suzuki method too. So you would attend lessons with them, and you would work with them. And if you don't, it will be obvious. You can't hide that fact. If you are not willing to commit to that kind of a commitment, then maybe you would do better to be involved in a class-like setting, and then pursue private lessons
Age appropriately.
Right.
for notation. So, meaning when your child's able to decode, when they start sounding out words,
Yeah.
they're able to decode written music. They're able to decode language.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't start before that if you don't want to do the work with them. Would you all agree with that?
Definitely.
Very much.
Okay.
Yeah, very much.
So tell me about your experiences with working with really young students in private lessons.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a parent ask you to do that? And
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
tell me how that went down.
Do you want to take?
No, go.
Okay.
No, please.
This one, this is really interesting because it's not predictable at all. You really can't know. You know, some parents say, I had one parent say, my son has a great attention span. He's going to do great. He's ready. And we had 2 lessons, and this child was not ready. And we were doing, you know, other activities. We were not only focusing on the instrument,
Right.
but it became very clear because developmentally, the music lesson, like that formal time, happened to be intersecting with his no phase. So like, right. So these are
Yeah.
things that like you don't necessarily think to factor in, but just on an emotional development level,
Yep.
he was on one path that just made try this. No, it made it actually impossible.
Yeah.
So, you know, so that child wasn't ready, and who knows, a month later, maybe he would have
so.
been, you know, you just don't know. And then I have another little student who's the same age, and we do ukulele, and we do, you know, we sing solfege, and he's learning notation. We sing solfege as it goes up. And I should clarify, he's not learning how to read music, but he's learning that it goes line, space, and as it travels,
Right.
it gets a new name.
Yeah.
And we meet twice a week, and it's his favorite time of the week, and he's playing music, and he'll probably be ready for our recital in November. You just don't know. And okay, his mom is a concert pianist, so like,
There you go.
she
Yeah.
knows how to facilitate practice time.
Yeah.
So, you know,
That's
that's a part of it. But I think, you know, even if she didn't have that musical background, the fact that she sets aside time every day to kind of go over what,
Right.
you know, we work on Tuesdays and Thursdays helps him get ready. And now we have a routine.
Right.
So
I
it
think
just, yeah.
I think maybe I might be reading into this question, but I think that there's an element of fear in parents that if I don't start them in a particular lesson or study early enough, they're going to be behind.
Yeah.
They're not going to develop the skills they need to develop.
Yeah.
But I would not discredit the education that you receive informally.
Absolutely.
And so if your child is not ready for notation, if they're not ready for formal learning, if they just can't sit still, they just can't pay attention.
Or maybe
There's nothing wrong with
haven't
that.
shown any interest.
Right.
Like sometimes that's, you know, I think it's really amazing. Like you and I both started really early. Georgia, you didn't start your formal lessons until you were 9.
Right.
Which for, you know, if we waited, heaven forbid, to start our kids on a soccer team until they're 9 years old, man, they're out of the game at this point.
Yeah.
But that's not how it is
Right.
with music. And
Right.
with, you know, especially, you know, with the arts. Like there's
Right.
so so much in us that has developed informally over the years.
Right.
That it's there. And I mean, you've gone on to accomplish some really amazing things and are an accomplished musician. And so that's really exciting for parents who have, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids who haven't done any formal music training yet. If your child is interested in it, explore it.
Yes.
Find a good teacher, ask around, and see what happens. And it may be that they get to middle school and they're paired up with an instrument in the band, and oh my goodness, here we go. Like that's really exciting to me. That it doesn't. I'm dealing with a situation where my 8-year-old son, I put the hammer down and wanted him to take piano lessons, and so for 2 years we struggled constantly with not wanting to practice, not wanting to do this. He was good. He could read the notes. He could play the songs. Technically, he had it. He had no desire for it. So, outside of my broken heart, I've been able to set that aside for him, knowing that the foundation has been set for the rest of his life. There will be other things that will come up. Like I said, I have high hopes for middle school band.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. No, I know. But I think that we have to take into account that, there isn't necessarily a window.
Right.
There can be an early instruction. We obviously all believe in early instruction.
Right. The earlier you start, the better.
The better.
But it doesn't have to be serious.
Right. And you can find that in a private instruction setting.
Absolutely.
Too.
Absolutely.
Somebody who understands what that age
Yes.
looks like.
And do not put your young child in lessons with a teacher who doesn't understand young children. That is a disaster for both of them.
Yes.
So,
That's true.
right, actually, that's the leading reason why kids quit lessons is that they're asked to do things that are developmentally inappropriate.
Right.
Yeah.
They can't do it. They become very frustrated.
Yeah.
And if the teacher doesn't know what to expect developmentally from a child, they think your child is just being stubborn and not participating. They're not practicing. And that's simply not true.
Right.
So we really don't want that to be the situation.
Yeah.
The other thing that we've talked about is finding the right instrument for a child. So my parents needed a piano player, very musical family, and we already had guitar and bass and drums, and so I was the last kid, so I had to play piano. And so I endured 6 years of piano lessons with a wonderful teacher. If Miss Ann is watching, I love you. Thank you for your patience with me. But I didn't feel passionate about piano. And so finally my parents let me quit and switch to voice lessons. And I am passionate about voice. I think about vocal cords all the time. Like, I'm really into it. I love voice. And so your child may not love their first instrument.
Yeah.
So just, you have to be aware and be sensitive and be kind and supportive. And most of all, keep music fun. If it feels like a burden, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, you started lessons at 9, but I have a feeling you were around music before 9.
Yeah.
I want to hear about it.
Yeah, I know.
I know you had to have had this exposure.
Well, my mom was actually a swing dancer. So
Fun.
I spent like a lot of
With the big band.
times in
Yeah.
my childhood
Yeah.
sleeping under a bench in a dance hall. Just falling asleep to the music and
I knew it was there.
So that was my big thing. So I really grew up in a music scene, really. Like I knew working musicians, I knew all of that, and I was exposed to it. So I don't know if actually musically that helped, but when I was ready to learn music, I had an idea of what a person who makes music
Right.
does,
What they do.
what they do. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you were seeing a steady beat.
Yeah, exactly.
I know you were watching that through your growing
Yeah.
up years. That's very cool. All right. Well, I feel like we sort of answered if you're not naturally musical, if you haven't studied music, but you want that for your child, I think what would be encouraging to you to know is that you can encourage them through just showing enthusiasm and support.
Definitely.
And, you know, turn on music from your glory days and sing at the top of your lungs, even if it's horrible.
Yeah.
And
That's fine.
just show your kids that you can have a great time with music. So you don't have to be a trained musician to do that.
Right. And if you have a young child in lessons, I would recommend finding a teacher who can train you to help them too.
Yes.
That's a big thing.
Definitely.
So
And
you
it's-
can learn the notes with the kids.
It might feel like a pain, you know,
Yes.
to add more to your schedule, but it will be enriching for
Yes.
you as well.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think that's
Yeah.
for me.
I didn't eat.
You didn't eat.
So I'm going to turn this off and I'm going to
Mine's
eat.
done.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you next
Bye.
time.